Good evening, everybody. Lovely to see you here. I have got the lovely Jason Shiers with me this evening, although he's just gone offline. Oh, you're back. Thank God for that. So welcome, Jason.
Hi.
The reasons for this interview series is for Mental Health Month, as I've explained, for those of you that have been watching these videos. And Jason has very kindly agreed to talk to me about his life story, really, and about how he has overcome his issues with weight and body image and addictions. So I'm really happy to talk to you, Jason. Thank you for giving us your time.
Oh, you're welcome. It's nice to be asked, and it's a great opportunity to share the message, with other people that may be struggling with similar experiences.
Yeah, well, I did for many, many years, and I know that many of the women in my tribe do struggle with body image and weight issues and food addictions and different addictions anyway. And I know when I reached out to you, it's because I've been contacted by a couple of men, and I was thinking, I didn't realize, because I haven't worked with men for so long, that was something that would be of interest to them. So I wondered if you could tell us, the people watching, a little bit about your background.
Yeah. Like, where do you want me to start? Like, kind of like where I started to, where my story developed, or what's really interesting?
Well, it's all interesting, I think, but I think particularly when you felt that you had a draw or, a desire for food.
Yeah. I think for me, the desire, I remember from a very early age that in my house, after my dad died, my dad was killed in an accident, and while there was no real, clear, like knowledge of what was going on, I just remember there being a desire to eat more. And there was always an argument. There was a constant argument in our house of like, who has eaten, it was always me, but like, who's eaten this, who's eaten this? And it was never me then. I was just like, no, it wasn't me, it's kind of, but I remember being excited when my mum would go out and leave me in the house, because like my mind was going then. I can like clearly remember like a very early age of thinking when I knew I was going to be in the house alone, of what food could I get away with eating, what food could I get away with stealing, what wouldn't they notice was missing. So it's like there was definitely a compulsion and a lot of thinking about food at that time.
And that was after the death of your father?
Not directly, but at some point, in the time afterwards, in the years afterwards.
So then what happened? How did that sort of progress for you with regards to food and weight?
Yeah, I just gained weight at an alarming rate. Every year of my life, I gained a stone in weight. So from the age of 5 to the age of 16, where I ended up at 16 stone, and that wasn't the heaviest, but it just progressed in a kind of somewhat linear way, during that time. And I would say that in the initial period of that, from the ages of about 7 years old, everything went pear-shaped, to a point of where it spilled into so many different areas of life, with school and being out of control and disconnected from life and lonely, isolated, gaining weight. Even in the family pictures during those years, the pictures just got less and less, from when I was a young child to when I was sort of 8 or 9 years old. There was hardly any pictures at all already. And in the pictures that I've got where I was really overweight at that age, you could see. And I remember to the point where there's kind of chunks missing of my life that I just couldn't remember. But I remember being very lonely and very very at odds with the world, just kind of wondering what it was all about, and feeling out of place, feeling different, going through the typical school bullying type ridicule because of being overweight, and just wanting to be on my own, just not really fitting into life with no real connection of grief or loss, or there was no sense of it. I didn't make any sense of it.
But you were making sense of eating. That was where you were getting some sense.
There was a sense of comfort, maybe, yeah. Subconsciously, not even in a conscious awareness. It wasn't like food makes me feel better, so I have it. It was just a case of there was just a compulsion and an obsessive thought about food that was there on a consistent basis. By that time, things had got out of control in the family. My mum, I went through experiences of being bribed to lose weight, being offered money to lose weight, being taken to specialists, diet doctors. Back in, when was that? That was the 80s. You could go and get diet pills and from anywhere, and I was put on diet pills at a very early age, which, knowing what I know today, were just speed. At that time there was little regulation, so it was almost like they were quite, my family were quite involved in trying to fix me.
Gosh, okay, speed, eh?
Yeah. Tenuate dustpan it was. I was writing about it the other day. I remember them well. Yeah, don't forget some things.
No, goodness. So how did you, so this was your life as sort of growing up as a teenager, and you talked about kind of obsessive thoughts about food. Can you just expand a little bit about what that looked like for you? Because I know when I, for me, that's how it played out in different forms, whatever it might be. But I know when the women I talk to, they talk about like this Groundhog Day, this constant thinking, this heaviness about it. And I wondered if you could talk about it from your perspective, what that was like.
Yeah. Obsessive thoughts around food. Obsessive thoughts are an overwhelming thought that overrides all other thoughts, and that might sound a little bit technical, but that's exactly what it's like. That it's like it's consuming and it's overwhelming, and nothing else seems important at the time, and until that, what becomes a need, what becomes a feeling, it becomes a physical compulsion, to eat is just the most prominent, the most prominent thought, the most prominent thing. It just overwhelms everything else, and until it's satisfied. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the sort of food bit, but I know you had other addictions. Is that right?
Yeah. Food was the initial thing because it was more socially acceptable or easily available, or it was just the thing that was there. And once I found drugs, with the food addiction, there was a lot of pain, a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness, a lot of overthinking. What I used to call the committee lived in my head. Were waiting for me when I woke up on a daily basis, which was really just overthinking. A lot of thinking. And when I took drugs, the committee had a rest. They went quiet. They had a sleep for a little while, and I got some peace. And for the first time since I ever started thinking, which was, I'm guessing at the age of 6 or 7 years old, when thinking really developed, from the time when I'd started thinking to the point where I first took drugs at 13 or 14 years old. I got a break. I got some respite. I got some freedom, some peace, some disconnection from all the shit that I used to live with on a daily basis. That really, was just like, there was just a mass management of thoughts and feelings, on a daily basis. But it was like, it was just nice. It was nice to escape from that.
Yeah, I really understand that. And I had a similar experience for drugs and drink, actually. And I'm sure many of the people watching will probably understand that you're looking for peace of mind. But I know that you now know that you were kind of looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And which, of course, I do too. So I wondered if you could tell the people watching, because I want to come back to like the weight and stuff, but I want you to maybe talk a little bit about how you came to see something different for yourself.
I had different experiences of what I might call breakthroughs over the years, and I had what I might call behavioral modifications that kind of worked for a short period of time over those years as well, where, you know, I first spent many years in 12-step recovery, where I found some sense of freedom at first, from the compulsive eating, but never really much respite from the body image. You know, it was always just a management, you know, a management of that to get to thinking that this was how life was. And, you know, I had to some way just cope with it, you know, in the best way that I could. So after years and years of doing, you know, 12 steps and different, and then in therapy for a long time, where I also got, you know, I don't really know what happened, but I did, you know, I couldn't really say things got much better for sure. And training as a therapist, where I'd say things got progressively worse. You know, it was only when I found the understanding of the three principles that I experienced a freedom from it, a point where how the whole experience of my life, you know, the being overweight being a thing, then having to do something about the thing, you know, like how it was imposed onto me, you know, in my childhood, and then it was, you know, then I, you know, what looked in society like a, you know, like there's a weight problem, there's people who need to, you know, it was all created. It's all created. There's no such thing. And, you know, and I just bought into that as in it was real. Like I was an overweight kid who had a problem with food, who needed to do something about it. And you know, what I realized was that all that was just bullshit. You know, it was just all made up. It all played into my feelings about myself. It was just, you know, a creation of an existence. You know, that's the word. It wasn't for.
You cut out a bit there. Sorry, you cut out a bit there. I just want to. There's some people watching us, and I know that they might have some questions. So I just want to say to the people watching, hello, and if you want to say hello and write some questions for Jason, I know he's really, really keen to have questions. Yeah. One of the things you said there was, you know, like about weight and it's all made up. Now, a lot of people who watch my stuff wouldn't know what that means and live in a world where they believe themselves to be overweight and they carry that thought with them all day long. It's very heavy, and you know, they're tired. So what would you say, like when you say it's all made up, what do you mean?
I mean, how I see that today is that, you know, we live in a reality that we create within our minds via the power of thought. So I have, you know, like I have a body, a physical body, you know, and it's like it may well be of a certain weight or not, you know, it's kind of like, and then there's all sorts of things that are imposed by, you know, what we see as influences in society, you know, so many stories about unhealthiness, about being overweight, what an ideal weight is, what you should be, what you should eat. Excuse me. And, you know, I see those things and I think they apply to me, you know, like that I need to be like those things that I see. But like the reality is that somebody else has just created them. They're not real. You know, it's kind of like someone else has decided what is healthy, what is overweight. And it's like, then I take that on as an identity and I live within that framework of like taking on that identity. And, you know, me as in who I am as a human being, you know, that's not me. That's not my identity. That's just something I've took on. It's something I've bought into. And what I found is that when I take on a created identity, you know, through the power of thought, then I'm spending my time trying to change that identity, you know, to be something else that I think is acceptable in society. And I can never do that. I can't do that. There's no place of happiness. There's no place of peace or contentment in that process, in that management of who I think I am. And what I found was that I was always battling with that, you know, with that weight, like that if only I could be thin, I would be accepted in society. If only I could be thin, I would find a relationship or a girlfriend. If only I was thin, I would be happy and content. I would get a job. And it was like, so I was always in that painful place of chasing those experiences that I thought came from my weight. And it's like, it just completely misses out the real, you know, the essence of life, that happiness is only available from within, that when I realize who I am and that I'm not those created identities, that happiness is available only in the moment, you know, not at a certain place or time, or definitely not at a certain weight, you know. And what I found, the last thing about that is that what I found was that the more I was in that process of trying to fix those things that I thought were wrong with me, the last thing I could ever do was lose any weight. You know, it was like, it was just like a vicious cycle completely, because it was painful to be me, and the food was my tool to cope with the painful emotions, you know.
I do know, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to that part. It's pain, like what? So a lot of people might be sitting there thinking, okay, so it fits within me, but I really am fat, and if I was thinner, then I would X, Y, Z. What would you say to those people?
Well, I understand what it feels like, what that experience feels like, you know, because I've been in a fat body, you know, and a body that had excess weight that I didn't like. And it really did look to me, you know, that if I lost this weight, I would be happy. I got that. And, you know, when my focus changed, how my reality was created through thought. Those thoughts about myself got easier, you know, they got less. I saw through them. And what happened was that when I started to see how life came from me, how life was created by me, that happiness was within me, you know, when I started to see and experience that, only in short moments at first, you know, it's the weight took care of itself. And what I realized in my kind of yo-yo experience of that was that every time I got fixated on my external body, like changing my external body, I lost my peace of mind. And it was like, and then it was like, it was falling asleep, then waking up again. And that's what it was like. You know, I'd fall asleep to the fact of who I really was. And I'd think I was this, I'd created identity of being an overweight person. And then I'd get fixated on, I'd think, okay, right, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to do this. And my world would just close in, you know, and it was almost like my world was this big, you know, what I could see in front of me. And I'd be, yeah, I'm going to the gym. And as soon as it had changed, it's like I'd be devastated. You know, I'd gain a pound. I'd get on the scales every day, and it's like it'd all be over with. And then I'd just cave in and start eating again. And then I'd like think, you know, and then it was like a case of, you know, when my life wasn't about that, when my life was just about who I am, you know, the contentment that's within me, you know, the happiness that's within me. I wasn't fixated on the weight. Then the weight would just naturally fall off by itself. I was able to make sound decisions. Like I had a clear access to the wisdom that's inside all of us, you know, the innate wisdom that's inside every human being. That's kind of blinkered, you know, when I'm fixated on changing myself from the external place. I don't really see much wisdom. I don't hear much wisdom. I'm just caught up in my own thinking about how to change myself, how I'm not acceptable, how if I wasn't fat, things would be different, I'd be happier. And, you know, when I'm happy and content, you know, it's quite easy to make sound choices. You know, it's quite easy to go and think, that doesn't seem like a good idea at the moment, you know? And like, for me, that was innovative because like, it was like, I'd never had the access to that. It was always like, I was just driven by food and change and diet and obsession and crazy thinking, you know? But like to see that I can actually make sound choices and sound decisions about what's right for me was, you know, quite magical.
It is magical, and that's what I kind of want to explore that a little bit with you, because I think that's actually where the magic is for people. Is how did you see through the nature of your thinking as being something that you don't have to pay attention to in the form of go eat, you know, go diet, whatever. How did you get to a place where you could hear your own wisdom?
It didn't just come in the form of thought, you know, it changed my life completely, you know. And I'd gone to LA to an intensive with Michael Neal, and I remember arriving with the weight of the world on my shoulders. It was like my bank balance looked a problem, my job looked a problem, my weight looked a problem, everything looked like something I had to manage, I had to change, I had to do something about. And I remember after those 3 days leaving, just thinking, wow, you know, like everything just feels so different. And it wasn't like there was like a bolt of lightning insight experience. And I've heard insight described in different ways. It was just that everything in my life looked different. And, you know, when I got into looking at that afterwards, you know, it's like I'd already had the experience of realizing that things were different. And I started looking, you know, then started looking at that. And I could just see like the stick, you know, what was pointed out to me was that like who I am looks different based on my state of mind. You know, like on one day, I may have been in a happy mood and a good state of mind, you know, and it's kind of like, I wouldn't be sitting thinking I'm fat. And it's kind of like, and I need to do this and I need to change that. I'd just be okay. But on the next day, I'd wake up in a shitty mood. And it's like, and I'd be like, the focus and obsession would be on my weight and my size, you know, and I'd be looking at myself in the mirror, wanting to cut, you know, to the point of wanting to cut chunks of myself off, you know. It's kind of like just really, really uncomfortable thinking, I don't even want to go out today. So it's like I could see the stickiness of that, you know, like the different experience with a different state of mind.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've had a couple of comments that I just want to read out. I don't know if I can show this on the screen, actually.
Yeah, I can see them. I can see the comments.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
So CJ, hi CJ. So CJ said hello to you.
Hi,
Thanks for sharing. I'm wondering if you ever used overeating or even drugs as a form of self-harm. You knew it was wrong, and so you were punishing yourself, ? So I'm guessing from that she's asking you, have you used overeating and drugs as a form of, would you consider it self-harm, I think? And I think the second part of the question is, do you think you were punishing yourself if you knew it was wrong at the time that you were doing it?
Yeah. I read that question a bit differently. I thought, you know, yeah, I think it's absolutely was self-harm that I knew all along. I got the feeling that what CJ was asking was that, you know, did I actually think I'm going to harm myself now by doing this, you know, consciously, even though looking back at it, it was obviously self-harm, you know, like the whole process. I think that there were definitely experiences where, you know, with both drugs and food, where like my final message was about, you know, you're just a piece of shit anyway, so you may as well do this, you may as well do that, you know, and whatever that was, you know, in a form of punishing myself, for sure. I mean, that was constant. But and there were times of wanting to die. You know, there was lots of thought about suicide during that real dark time. You know, when particular memories were very painful, especially about my dad and things like that. You know, but I couldn't really say any more than that, you know, in order to answer the question. I don't know if there's anything more specific, really.
Yeah, CJ, let us know if that answers your question, or if there's anything else that you'd like Jason to answer. Deline has said, it's painful to be me. My issue today is not so much food, but another mind alternating substance, very legal, very addictive, and very much like food. Believe me, I was very much there with food, anorexia, exercise, obsessed.
Yeah, I can feel that in that message, you know, and it's never really about the substance, you know, and the food or the behavior or the person or whatever it is, you know. It was like they were always my focus, you know. Were about you know, whatever the particular addiction was at the time. And it wasn't until I really saw that how my thoughts created my experience, and how I saw that the substance or person or thing or whatever it was, or the belief that something outside of myself was going to make me feel better, you know, was all just a symptom of the same thing, you know, like the internal condition that I suffered with. And, you know, it felt really painful on a daily basis, you know, just to be me, just to live, just to survive, just to get by, just to, you know, just to get through life on a day was, you know, every day felt like it went on for hours and weeks at times, you know, and unless I was at a place of oblivion. And, you know, trying to stop the symptom, you know, trying to stop taking a substance, or trying to stop compulsively eating, or trying to stop obsessively doing something that I thought was going to fix me and make me feel better. It's like, it's impossible, you know. It's just kind of like, you can't just stop. You know, people say, oh, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just eat salad? Why don't you, you know, go to the gym or get a job, or, you know, go to college and stop taking drugs? It's like, you know, they don't really understand, you know, how it feels to be in that experience, you know, and I really get it, that it's painful to be, you know, to live that way.
Yeah, me too. So CJ has said thank you. So I'm hoping that you answered her question.
Yeah.
You probably read what it was meant to say.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about the nature of thought as something that you were able to see how you were creating your experience.
Yeah.
Can you tell, because a lot of my people wouldn't necessarily understand what that means. So do you have a way of explaining, you know, because is it personal thought? Obviously, I know what you're talking about, but I'd like you to maybe explain it in a way that they can understand that their experience is being created by thought. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. I love I love talking about traffic, you know, and it's such a simple explanation that I can't remember where I heard it. I'm not going to take credit for creating this, but someone said, you know, if you drive to work on the same route every single day, and one day you're driving to work on the route to work, and you like arrive at work like really pissed off, you know, like, and you're shouting at everyone in the car and you're going, move out the fucking way, you know, everything, like, and you arrive in work like in a real shitty mood. And the next day you're driving exactly the same route, and you're just feeling really calm, and you're letting people, the traffic's the same, you know, it's like you're letting people out, everything's cool, and you arrive at work in a great mood, and everything's okay. Thoughts about the situation that changes, and like that's, you know, that's the same for all of life, you know. It's not about circumstances, it's not about that. It's like the experience that you're having in life comes from the thoughts about the circumstances, and so it's like it's never the traffic, you know, it's always the thoughts about the traffic that create the experience. And when I saw that, I was just kind of like, I only had to see it in such a little glimpse, you know, just a little glimpse of how that was true, that like I started looking for it in all areas of my life. I started seeing it, and it was almost like dominoes falling, that once one had fell, it was just like, oh shit, yeah. Oh shit, yeah. You know, it's kind of like, and just like lots of insights into how I was creating the feelings that I was having, you know, like in my thoughts about the experience, my thoughts about myself, about who I was, about how my body was, about the things I needed to do, about food, about the way I needed to lose weight to get a relationship. I was starting to see that all that, the feelings that I had, the depression, the pain, the suffering, you know, the daily embarrassment about because I was massively overweight, you know, and all those things were all created from within me. They weren't created by the fact that I was overweight. They were created by from my thoughts about, you know, the physical body that I had.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's a good way for people, and Delene has said yes, thank you. A good example of how you can examine it. I think this understanding really is something that you can only see for yourself. Like,
yeah,
if you guys who are watching and listening get a feeling from listening to Jason, certainly a feeling of hope, but just a feeling when you're listening to him, because he has kind of calmness, and you can see that he's calm and peaceful about it now, but has a deep understanding into how he has created that experience for himself. CJ has said, love the traffic analogy, so simple and so obvious, but only after it's been pointed out. And I think there's so much good work being done now around the 3 principles, and so many people doing some amazing things. But for a long time, people are looking in the wrong direction, and no one teaches you that. So I know you did psychotherapy for a long time, didn't you?
Yeah. I was always a searcher, you know. I just wanted to feel better. So it was like, you could see that as wisdom, you know, like that wisdom's always available if you look for it. And I saw that a lot in my childhood, no matter how chaotic it was. But yeah, I was always searching, and I'd done some therapy, and in my quest for uniqueness, I decided to train as, I found the most difficult, what I looked like the most difficult psychotherapy, that took the longest training and seemed like the most in depth with the most theory, and was the most intense course. So I trained in that for 5 years, thinking that it was going to make me better, you know, that it was going to improve my life. And that once I got an understanding of why, you know, and once I'd come to terms with my past and my grief and my loss and my trauma of my dad and my addiction and my depression, anxiety, and all the things that I'd suffered with, you know, like then, only then would I be okay, you know. And so I spent years, and you know, most of the time in my training, I curled up in a ball, you know, and felt so empty and so in touch with that grief and that loss, and you know, with another belief that if I did this, I'd feel better afterwards, you know. That, oh, this is what it's meant to be. I need to get in touch with this, and I had a belief that because I'd run away from all that pain in my addiction about my dad and all the stuff about weight, that I needed to go back, and somehow going back and talking about it was going to allow some process of fixing, and then I would feel better and I would no longer want to eat or, you know, take drugs or whatever it was. You know, that was my belief about therapy. But things just got progressively worse, you know, to the point where I went through a horrific depression when I was training as a therapist, you know.
Are you saying then, because like I was referencing CJ's comment about, you know, it's simple if someone points it out to you. When you were doing psychotherapy, you were saying that you got chronically depressed because you were bringing it into the moment, the grief, the loss, the addictions. Have I got that right? Have I understood that right?
Yeah. I mean, that's my understanding of today, of like, that was my experience, and that's my understanding of it today, you know, is that like, that's pointless, you know, like bringing it, touching on all the past, bringing it all up, it makes sense that it made me feel worse. It made sense that I developed overwhelming anxiety, that I couldn't get on planes without medication, that I went through a depression where I just wanted to die and I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. How times, but I didn't have that overwhelming anxiety. I didn't have that depression, you know, to the point where things really looked literally dark outside all the time, you know, and I didn't want to go out of the house at all. I didn't have that before I did that training, and making sense of it from what I understand now about, you know, reading the work of Sid Banks and being around the three principles. It's like, it makes sense that if I'm just going to dredge up the past as a way of trying to deal with it, that I'm going to get more in touch with that experience and feel the emotions of the past. And you know, and there's nothing in that for me. There's nothing in doing that. You know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't talk about the past, because for sure that's going to be part of everyone's life, you know, but there's a difference in just talking about it, not as in talking about it as a way of healing it, you know.
Sorry, it cut out a bit there, Jason, but I don't think it's cutting out on everyone else's screen, just mine. So that's good. So where you are today then is very different. So one thing occurred to me actually as you were talking, and I don't know if you could explore this. What were your relationships like when you were kind of in the thick of that heavy thinking?
Relationships were always quite difficult and challenging, you know. Family relationships historically were difficult for me to cope with. And any form of friendships that I had over time were formed through codependency. You know, they were always addictive relationships, and any sort of intimate, well, what I might call intimate today, but at the time they probably weren't. You know, any sort of relationships that I got into were just painful and I might use the word dysfunctional to describe them. They were based on the fact of like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't have a clue about who I was. I certainly couldn't have a clue about who anyone else was. They were just based on the fact of whether they made me feel better or not. You know, that was all I wanted. Everyone had a use or a purpose. And I would never have admitted that at the time. You know, I would have never have said that, but it was like, that was how it was. You know, I wanted someone else to make me feel better. So that was what the function of relationships were during that, while I was in the depths of that. I just didn't have any love for myself, and I certainly didn't have any love for anyone else. You know, I was just incapable of that. So they were just notoriously difficult, you know, full of arguments, full of struggles, full of made up stuff about what they should be like and how they should be and what I should get, and my sense of entitlement and my anger and my insecurity, you know, all the things that I projected outwardly onto other people that I because I wanted them to make me feel better, because I was in this process. The whole thing, I mean, can be encapsulated in the fact that I wanted something, someone, anything to make me feel better inside, whether it was food, weight, drugs, people, relationships, money, sex, weight loss, weight gain, whatever, cosmetic surgery, jobs, whatever it was, therapy. It's all the same. It's all on the same premise that that happiness comes from something outside, from changing, and it wasn't until I realized that it only came from one place, from inside. Was the rest of it fell into place and just came anyway.
So tell us about that. Where are you today, and how is life for you now?
Life's cool, life's really magical, and I don't have to think about food. I don't have to think about what I eat. I can eat what I want because I trust my wisdom in the moment to decide that what's right for me and what's not. And the best thing about that is I don't have to weigh myself. I mean, I got on scales every day of my life for many, many years, and I don't have to weigh myself. I don't have to be consumed and obsessed with why I have or haven't been to the gym, whether I need to, or anything like that. It's just not an issue. It's a non-issue for me. I don't really think about it. I look good. I feel good, and that's it. And it's like, that's as far as it goes. And I get to have the amazing experience of working with others, who have that same struggle, and seeing the lights come on for them too, like they did for me. And not only that area of my life, but, freedom from addictions, freedom from depression, freedom from anxiety, not only just freedom, but thriving to the point of loving life and being excited every day when I wake up. I mean, I couldn't say that for most of my life. I could say that I got up with dread, most days. I got up with dread about life. I got up with, struggle. I got up with people living in my head, resentment and anger and bitterness about what people have. I just get up free, and peaceful. And it's like I get up wondering what exciting things are going to happen today, and what's going to come into my life, who's going to come into my life, who am I going to speak to, what conversation am I going to have. Beautiful times with my kids, and connection and some amazing conversations with some amazing people that have been put in my path. And I mean, I really feel that life just, maybe it could get better. I don't know, but it feels pretty cool, to be honest.
I'm so pleased. I feel exactly the same. CJ has just said, everyone has told me I need to revisit my trauma to deal with it and therefore be able to move on. You're the first voice to suggest otherwise, and that opens up a huge new road to go down. But the blame I feel for my fuck-ups towards the traumas is hard to ignore. It's letting go of excuses to be unhappy, I guess. Do you have any words of wisdom for CJ?
Yeah. There's lots of suggestions and specialists who deal with trauma from a psychological therapeutic point of view, and that is what their business is built on, and people do suggest that, I used to do it, it's kind of like they'd come to therapy and it'd be like, that sounds really bad, you're going to have to come to long-term therapy for that, it's not something we can deal with in 6 or 8 sessions or 3 months. It's like, it's going to take years, and the thing was that was innocently, because that's what I believed, that's what I'd been told. And the difference is today is what I've seen to be true is that I'm free if that's not my story anymore. And I only got that freedom from seeing how I'd attached, how I'd used thought to create the story. I mean, on my podcast, I was just listening to a podcast that I did about how experience was created, and we were talking about trauma, you know, and like for me, what I realized was the actual event, you know, was neutral. You know, yeah, it was tragic, it was sad. Like that's what I felt at the time, you know, and it still is. You know, I still feel sad about losing my dad. You know, it's kind of like it's never going to be a great thing, but the suffering that I created and the story that I created around it, you know, was created by thought in the moment. You know, and it's something that I held on to, you know, over the time. And you know, when I saw that how thought in the moment created my feelings about the trauma, you know, that's when I felt when I got free of it. You know, it was going back and talking about, you know, what happened the day that he died, digging into it, how I felt afterwards, whether anyone helped me with grief, you know, and all those things. They just took me back into the experience, and I just suffered, you know, and suffered and suffered and suffered. And it's like, I'm not saying that like trauma is insignificant or in any way something to be belittled, but it's, you know, bringing it into the present day is created by thought in the moment, you know, and it's experienced through that, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I was told I had to have psychotherapy twice a week because I was completely broken. That was what I was told. And you know, to talk about the trauma and the post-traumatic stress and all of that. And I used to really wonder, like, why do I feel worse when I leave these sessions? But I bought into, oh, well, I'm obviously broken, I've got post-traumatic stress, you know, grief, whatever. So thank you for saying that, CJ, because I'm really, really pleased that you've heard something else. I'm really pleased that you can see that that's not the only option, and actually there's a much wiser option for you. And I'm guessing that your own wisdom knows that to be true anyway. One question, Jason, that I was asked to ask you was, with trauma, some people experience disassociation from their body. And I wondered what your thoughts were around that with this understanding.
The body and, you know, the body and mind connection is so powerful and so evident to me, and it just makes perfect sense with trauma that kind of like that's the body's and mind's way of dealing with the experience. You know, it's got a self-correcting mechanism built into the system, you know, and like when you have an experience that like can't be made sense of by the mind, it's something that's devastatingly difficult to cope with. It's like it makes sense that the system finds a way of shutting down, of disconnecting from it, of finding a way to get by. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, I love the cut on your finger. You know, there's nothing you need to do; it just heals by itself. You know, in the same way, but that's coping with, you know, horrific experiences, and you know, that's it. You know, that's how I see it. That's how it works. That's how the how our mind and body connection works.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just read a couple of comments that, but please do, guys, if you've got any other questions, please do let us know. CJ says, thank you both. Awesome chat. And Deline has said that she's been through so many years of therapy, and her son just addressed this with me over my mother's death, that I don't let go. Well, grief's a really hard one, I think, because if you're in it, it feels very real, and of course it's a difficult experience. So, what would you say, Jason, to someone who's just experienced a recent bereavement? Although, like, I think it could be anything. Because anyway, a bereavement. What would you say to them about hope?
You know, there's going to be feelings of sadness with grief. There's going to be periods of up and down, of being in and out of life and feeling, like, depending on how close you were or what the grief's like, whether you want to go on, how you're going to cope without somebody. I mean, that's just normal, there's nothing wrong with that. And the thing what I would say about grief is that, just experience it in however it comes. Don't get advice off people who tell you, oh, you should be dealing with it now, it's like been this time, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. It's like it is what it is. It just comes and goes. I haven't got any, like, there's no way of, I wouldn't want to take anything away from somebody in that experience. All I'd want to say is that, it is painful, it is a struggle, and whatever you experience is okay. And just get around people who let you be whatever you need to be. If you want to cry, cry. If you want to shout and scream, shout and scream. If you want to withdraw, then withdraw, and be the best thing that I got was from people who just allowed me to be me, whatever that was. Didn't tell me I needed to be different. It didn't tell me I need to change, or that I need to cope with it differently, or man up, or do whatever it is, that society suggests. How, grief doesn't have a set amount of time. It doesn't have a standardized way that it works for everybody. There's not a process. You can't go and speak to someone and get fixed in 3 sessions. It's like, that's not how it works, so just allow yourself the space to be, however you need to be.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna kind of round it off there. So I wondered if you could tell people where they can find you if they want to get hold of you.
Yeah, you can reach out to me on Facebook. I think I'm tagged in this somewhere, so you should be able to find me. Or my website is wideworldcoaching.com. So you can contact me through Messenger or through email that's on my website.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. I think a lot of people will get huge amounts out of this interview, and it's been an absolute pleasure and joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you guys for watching. And keep asking your questions if you're watching it later, and we'll come back to you.
Yeah, if anyone's got questions, I'll chime in on the comments and try and reply the best I can.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. Bye.